February 2026. Nigeria's Correctional Service tells the House of Representatives its facilities are holding over 80,000 people. Fewer than 25,000 of them have been convicted of anything. The other 52,000, nearly two-thirds of the entire prison population, are just waiting for a trial date, a judge, a bail sum they would never raise in their lifetime, or simply a file moving from one desk to another. This isn't new. Awaiting trial, detainees made up to 69% of the prison population in 2023, 67% as at 2024. It barely moves. Former Adamawa Governor Murtala Nyako, facing trial over an alleged 29 billion naira fraud, was quietly negotiating his way out of the courtroom entirely. Former Kogi Governor Yahaya Bello, facing two separate EFCC trials over roughly 190 billion naira in allegations, was busy winning a separate primary by a landslide. Abubakar Malami, Nigeria's own former Attorney General and Minister of Justice, the man who used to be in charge of persecuting corruption, was charged alongside his wife and son with laundering 8.7 billion naira and forfeiting 48 luxury properties worth roughly 212.8 billion naira. Their bail? 500 million naira. Do the math on that ratio. Former NIMSA Director General Callistus Obi was convicted in 2019 over 225 million naira fraud. Sentence: 7 years, with the option of a 42 million naira fine. He paid it on the spot, walked out, 0 time served. The Nigerian political climate is littered with mind-bulging cases just like these. Now, compare how the system treated ordinary Nigerians. Akim Jimo, a 28-year-old mechanic, got 3 years for stealing a few tubers of yam worth 35,000 naira. He told the court he was hungry. Ibrahim Samuel, 33, got 18 months in Benin City for stealing electrical fuses and copper wire. And Kelvin Ibodolo, 31, got 45 years for stealing a Sonic Ericsson phone in Osun State. The phone belonged to the sitting governor, Rauf Abesola. It goes further than years. It goes to life itself. Sunday Jackson, a farmer in Adamawa, while defending his life, killed a herder who had stabbed him twice. In 2021, he was sentenced to death. Sunday Jackson spent 11 years in the system before international outcry got him released. Shegun Olowokere was a teenager when he and an accomplice were arrested in 2010 for stealing hens and eggs. In 2014, he was sentenced to death by hanging. He spent over a decade on death row before a pardon finally came in late 2024. Set those two death sentences next to this. Roughly 211 trillion naira sitting unexplained at Nigeria's state oil company, NNPCL. Not one person has been prosecuted for it. Hear this. It is not only about who steals, it's about who the system protects and who it punishes for even trying to do the right thing. In early 2025, Tommy Wojula stopped in Asaba, Delta State to help a man who had collapsed on the road. He says a police divisional officer intimidated and extorted him for it. When it was finally resolved almost a year later, his own words were, "Many people are still in prison for cases less serious than mine." That's common enough that Nigerians openly say they now film emergencies on their phones instead of stepping in. Because helping can turn you into the suspect. And in August 2024, police arrested 75 people connected to a nationwide anti-hunger protest. At least 28 of them minors. 30 people, including 30 children, were eventually charged with treason and mutiny, charges that carry the death penalty. Under President Bola Tinubu, a man who has spoken proudly, publicly, about his own history in protest movements. A hungry man does 3 years for yams. Hungry teenagers protesting the same hunger get charged with a capital offense. At the very top, the patterns hold even on the international stage. Stella Odua's corruption case as a former aviation minister was discharged through a plea bargain. Desani Alison Madweke, former petroleum minister, spent over a decade fighting a UK bribery case. The National Crime Agency alleged she funded a lifestyle of luxury, including a super yacht and a real estate in California and New York. In June 2026, after 46 hours of jury deliberation, a London court acquitted her on all 6 counts. Not prove the allegations were false, just that the prosecution didn't meet its burden. Her own EFCC case back home has sat open since 2018, with no trial in sight. And this year, a 26-year-old physiotherapist named Mary Habila was found dead, unclothed, inside the private residence of David Umahi, Nigeria's sitting Minister of Works, in Oburu, Ebonyi State. Umahi didn't confirm her death publicly until Sahara reporters made the silence impossible to maintain 2 weeks later. Ebonyi's own director of public prosecutions disclosed blood around her nose and mouth and said only a post-mortem could establish the cause of death. This isn't Umahi's first unresolved episode either. 5 engineers working on an African Development Bank road project went missing in Ebonyi in 2021 after a dispute with him. Then the state governor. He announced at the time that they had been killed and buried before any remains were found. 5 years later, families say the case is still unresolved. Umahi has not been charged in either matter. An ordinary suspect would already be in a cell. Here's the part that should unsettle you the most. When ordinary people are accused of petty theft, mobs have stripped them, beaten them, sometimes killed them in broad daylight, filmed for social media, a spectacle. Amnesty International documented over 550 victims of mob violence in Nigeria between 2012 and 2023. 57 killed outrightly, 32 of them burned alive. But when politicians accused of stealing billions come home, they get parties. James Ibori, former Delta State governor, was deported from the UK in 2017 after serving time for a multi-million-pound fraud and money laundering conviction. He came home to a hero's welcome in Ogara, crowds, political associates, a sitting governor paying respect within the day. Yahaya Bello got the same treatment in Okene, from the very people whose future he is accused of stealing. Diepere Alamisega, former Bayelsa governor, jumped bail in London, money laundering case, reportedly fled in disguise and came home to thousands of cheering supporters in Yenogwa. As usual, the list is endless. Petty theft gets you beaten in the streets. Grand theft gets you crowned. So why does this keep repeating? Nigeria's plea bargain system lets defendants negotiate settlements instead of facing trial. A route only available to people who can afford the legal firepower to get there. It's how Odua's case ended. It's how Malami's may yet end too. Bail functions less like a flight risk safeguard and more like a wealth filter. 500 million naira is nothing to a family accused of laundering billions. And underneath all of it sits a judiciary that its own leaders admit is under strain. The Sultan of Sokoto has warned that justice in Nigeria is becoming a purchasable commodity. Former President Olusegun Obasanjo has written of the judiciary's precipitous fall, warning that when the justice serves only the highest bidder, society is left with despair and violence instead of order. That warning took a literal shape in Abuja, where FCT Minister Nyesom Wike himself, a politically exposed former governor with active cases before Nigerian courts, has overseen the construction of 40 fully furnished residential duplexes for judges, framed publicly as welfare, not influence. Here's the arithmetic. A hungry man does 3 years for yams. A phone thief gets 45 years because of who owned the phone. A farmer defending his life and a teenager who stole eggs both land on death row. And 211 trillion naira disappears with nobody charged. Only 8% of Nigerians say they actively seek police help. Most already know what the answer will be before they ask. The law here isn't a shield, it's a service. You either afford it or you hope the mob avoids you. We did not build this system. We can't be the ones who end it. If this got to you, share it. Follow the next one and join TNNP, a movement committed to sustainable change.